Hello, my dear friends. How lovely it is to have you back with us in our quiet corner. I do hope the world has been kind to you and that you find some peace in our story. Tonight, our journey takes us deep into the silent, frosted woods of the valley, where a peculiar treasure waits to help us learn about seeing the world through another's heart. As we walk beneath the tall pines, there is nothing more you need to do, nowhere else you need to be. Let your breathing slow down to match the deep, patient stillness of the sleeping earth, and let yourself drift into a state of total, untroubled rest. Just before we begin, take a long, slow moment to let your body settle completely into the quiet comfort of your bed. Let your arms rest loosely by your sides. Feel the deep, steady support of your pillow beneath your head, and let the outside world fade away into a soft, distant hum. Let us share one quiet, grounding breath together before the story begins, drawing in a deep, cool breath, holding it gently for a restful moment, and now releasing it with a long, peaceful sigh. Let your eyelids grow heavy as we step onto the forest path. The late autumn afternoon was held fast in a crisp, amber-tinted stillness. A pale marmalade sun hung low over the western ridges, pooling long, damson violet shadows across the forest floor. The air smelled beautifully of sharp pine resin, sleep-heavy loam, and the clean, silver promise of oncoming snow. Rosco and his companions had spent the hour pottering through the ancient timber stands, gathering the crunchiest wind-fallen pine cones to serve as kindling for the great cast-iron stove back at Rosehip Cottage. Their wicker baskets were nearly brimming, the dry scales of the cones making a comforting crinkle-crack with every slow, deliberate step. While Berry and Caratina searched the gnarled roots of a wild briar bush, Millie Moonbeam wandered toward an ancient, moss-upholstered ash tree. Its trunk was grand and beautifully twisted, hollowed out by centuries of winter huffing. As she reached down to scoop up a particularly plump pine cone, her eye caught a glimmer of unusual colour tucked deep within the dark, velvet-soft hollow of the tree. "Oh, do look here," Millie Moonbeam whispered, her voice a gentle puff of air that didn't dare disturb the solemn silence of the woods. "Someone has left a most remarkable treasure behind." The little troop tiptoed over, their boots pressing softly into the thick carpet of pine needles. Millie Moonbeam reached her arm into the hollow trunk and carefully withdrew a small, exquisitely tailored cap. It was a flat-topped woodman's hat, stitched together from panels of the finest, antique forest green moleskin. The fabric was extraordinarily thick, possessing a dense, stroke-soft nap that seemed to drink in the low golden light of the setting sun. When Berry gently pressed a paw against the brim, he gasped. It was astonishingly warm, as if it had been resting right beside a crackling hearth fire, rather than sitting inside a frozen tree. Turning the cap over, Millie Moonbeam revealed a lining crafted from the silkiest silver-grey down feathers, woven together with fairy-stitch precision. Tucked just beneath the inner rim was a tiny ink-etched linen ribbon that read, "The Secret View. Peer through the eyes of the one who walked before." It smelled deeply of old cedarwood, sweet apple smoke, and damp moss. It was a piece of quiet country magic, resting patiently in the palm of Millie Moonbeam's hand. The little group stood in a hushed circle, gazing at the moleskin cap with a sense of growing wonderment. The forest grew stiller than still. Even the distant caw of a crow faded into the lavender twilight. "Well," Rosco murmured, "there is only one way to unravel a countryside mystery. Who shall try it first?" Caratina looked at the soft, feather-lined rim, her long velvet ears twitching with insatiable curiosity. "I believe I shall," she whispered. With slow, reverent movements, Caratina took the forest green hat. She lifted it high, feeling the comforting, substantial weight of the heavy moleskin, and then gently lowered it over her brow, tucking her long ears neatly beneath the silver down feathers. The very instant the hat settled against her forehead, the familiar world of the valley melted away. It was a breathtaking topsy-turvy tumble into another world. Caratina felt her entire consciousness tilt and plunge, as if she was sinking deep into a warm, heavy well of honey. Her wide bunny vision, usually broad enough to sweep across the grand dales, vanished entirely. In its place, her viewpoint dropped instantly down, 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 right to the very surface of the forest floor. She was now looking at the world from a height of barely 3 inches. The small, scattered pine cones they had been gathering a moment ago now loomed like colossal bark-clad timber logs. The thin blades of frosted orchard grass were transformed into a dense, emerald jungle of giant stalks arching high over her head, blotting out the sky. But the shift in her sight was nothing compared to the symphony in her other senses. Her ears filled with a deep, heavy thrum, the profound, slow pulse of the sleeping earth humming through the soil. Her nose awakened to a vibrant, multicolored map of the undergrowth. She could suddenly smell the exact location of a sleepy beetle nesting deep in an old stump, the cold iron trail of a forgotten horseshoe yards away, and the sweet, starchy daydreaming of wild crocus bulbs tucked deep beneath the frost. Her body felt different too. Her long, springy hind legs felt short, heavy, twiggly short, and her belly brushing against the cool, damp moss. She wasn't just wearing a hat. She was fully immersed in the residual memory of the little creature who had worn it last. Inside the velvety darkness of the cap, Caratina was swept away to a bitterly cold twilight from the week before. The tranquil amber sunlight vanished, replaced by an iron-grey sky that hung heavy over the valley dales. A fierce, howling north wind whipped through the bare, skeletal branches of the ancient oaks, driving pelting needles of frozen sleet across the forest floor with a sharp, hissing sound. Caratina could feel every single sensation of the hedgehog's small, round body. She felt the dense, prickly weight of the protective spines along her back, shifting and rustling against one another with a dry crickling as she moved. The bitter wind was relentless, biting through the sparse fur of her underbelly, causing her tiny frame to shiver with a deep, bone-chilling cold. Her tiny, twiggly legs moved with a courageous, unceasing effort through the frozen undergrowth. Patter-scratch, patter-scratch. Every step required a deliberate, heavy exertion. To ears so close to the earth, the dry, frosted oak leaves didn't crunch softly. They sounded like ice cracking underfoot. A deep, powerful, motherly instinct filled the hedgehog's small heart. The great winter frost was settling into the valley early, turning the soft loam into solid stone, and her winter nursery was in grave danger. It was a shallow, small hollow dug beneath the lowest roots of the old log pile. Right now, that nursery was exposed to the cold north wind. Her 5 tiny, newly born hoglets were huddled together in the dark belly of the timber, their soft, pale pink prickles shivering helplessly. She needed thick insulation, and she needed it before the deep snow covered the lane. Through the hedgehog's low-down eyes, Caratina searched the frozen briars with sharp focus. She tried to gather a few scattered oak leaves, but her small paws were clumsy with the cold, and the strong gale kept tugging the leaves from her grasp, scattering them into the dark woods. She tried to scrape up bits of green moss from a limestone boulder, but the frost had frozen it hard as iron. The hedgehog was tiring, her strength draining into the frozen ground, her breath rising in short, rapid puffs of white steam. Then the memory shifted. Her powerful nose caught a sudden, unexpected drift of scent on the blustering wind, a scent that smelled of sweet lavender soap, dry cedar wood, and the warm, heavy aroma of a clean country hearth. It was the scent of Rosehip Cottage. Lumbering out of the dark tree line, the hedgehog made her way into the cultivated borders of the bunny's garden. To a creature whose eyes were barely 3 inches off the ground, the wooden porch of the cottage looked like a towering cliff of warm timber that blotted out the stars. She scrambled forward, her small paws scratching against the frozen stones of the path, until she reached the drying line that ran just above the frozen winter flower beds. And there, dangling from the lowest wooden peg, was a magnificent prize. The bunny's thick, hand-woven, plum-purple wool scarf. To the hedgehog, that scarf didn't look like a piece of clothing left out in the yard. It looked like a glorious mountain of pure, radiating warmth. It was woven from thick, double-stranded yarn, holding a dense pocket of air that could block out even the fiercest north wind. With a final, desperate burst of maternal energy, the small creature reared up on her short hind legs. She stretched her neck as far as it would go, her tiny teeth clamping onto the frayed wool fringe at the very bottom of the scarf. She pulled downward with all the weight of her round body, her paws digging for traction against the boards of the porch. For a long, breathless moment, the scarf held fast. The hedgehog pulled harder, her little heart galloping, her muscles straining against the heavy fabric. Then, with a soft, sliding rustle, the heavy wool scarf slipped off the line, tumbling downward in a soft, cloud-like heap of purple yarn that completely covered her, instantly shielding her shivering body from the pelting sleet. Caratina felt the immense, overwhelming wave of relief that flooded the hedgehog's heart in that exact moment. It was a profound feeling of pure maternal triumph. Painstakingly, step by slow, heavy step, the hedgehog began the long journey backward through the gathering snow. She dragged the heavy purple fabric using her teeth, hauling it down the frozen lane, across the ditch, and tucking it deep into the dark, hidden belly of the log pile. She wove the wool into a thick, impenetrable wall of soft fibre, sealing the gaps between the timber and creating a warm, cozy fortress that instantly made her babies warm, safe, and still. With a sudden, gasping breath, Caratina reached her paws upward and pulled the forest green moleskin cap completely off her head. The magical low vision of the world vanished in an instant. Her vision rushed back to its normal bunny height, and the quiet amber afternoon of the real woods settled around her once more. The howling wind and the pelting sleet dissolved into the crisp, motionless silence of the late autumn clearing. She stood on the carpet of pine needles, shaking slightly, her long velvet ears unfolding into the cool air, her chest heaving as if she had just lived through that desperate freezing race against the storm. Millie Moonbeam knelt down into the moss beside her, her face filled with a gentle, patient concern. She placed a reassuring hand on Caratina's shoulder. "Caratina, what is it? What did you see inside the hat?" Berry and Rosco pressed close, their baskets of pine cones resting at their feet. their eyes wide with quiet curiosity. Just that morning, the bunnies had been terribly cross about their missing purple scarf. They had grumbled over their breakfast bowls, complaining about a thoughtless thief who had raided their beautiful porch, and they had vowed to search every corner of the parish to find whoever had taken their prized winter clothing. Caratina looked at her companions, her large dark eyes soft and shiny, with a deep understanding that went further than words. The knot that had lived in her chest all morning simply melted away, dissolving into the quiet evening air like wood smoke rising from a chimney. "She isn't a thief," Caratina whispered, her voice a soft murmur that seemed to carry the weight of the hedgehog's memory. It was the mother hedgehog from the old log pile, Berry. It was the night of the great gale last week. She was so cold. Her little hoglets were shivering in the dark belly of the wood, and she couldn't find any dry leaves or moss, because the ground was frozen hard as iron. She didn't take our scarf out of greed, or mischief, or disrespect for our home. She took it because she was trying to save her babies from the frost. The little group stood completely still beneath the tall, silent pines. The word thief, which they had used so easily that morning, suddenly felt incredibly heavy, clumsy and entirely wrong, born from only seeing their own loss. Berry lowered his head, his long ears drooping with a touch of gentle sorrow for his earlier grumbling by the hearth. Through the quiet gift of the mysterious hat, the missing scarf was no longer a loss to be angry about. It was a lifeline that had kept a small, vulnerable family alive in the dark. The dilemma facing them now completely transformed. It was no longer a question of how to confront a culprit or demand the return of their property. The true dilemma was how they could help the hedgehog stay warm and secure for the rest of the long winter, without making her feel frightened, chased, or cornered in her hidden den at the edge of the woods. They needed to find a way to offer kindness anonymously, preserving her dignity and her safety in the quiet valley. The twilight was deepening rapidly as they made their way back to Rosehip Cottage, their boots crunching softly on the hard, frozen earth. There was no grumble left in their steps, only a quiet, happier purpose. Once inside the safety of the kitchen, they didn't sit down to rest. Instead, moving with a slow, deliberate cooperation, they began to prepare a special bundle. Millie Moonbeam brought out a deep, woven willow basket from the pantry. Into the bottom, Caratina carefully layered several thick scraps of soft, brushed red flannel left over from a winter quilting project. Berry added a generous handful of clean, sweet-smelling barley straw and a mound of dry, golden oak leaves they had stored in the shed. It was a collection of pure, insulated warmth, soft, dry, and entirely perfect for a winter nursery. When the night had fully settled and the silver stars began to blink awake over the high dales, Rosco and the bunnies walked out toward the edge of the woods. They moved with absolute quiet, their lanterns shuttered to a dim amber glow so as not to startle the nocturnal creatures of the lane. They reached the old log pile, a huge tangled mountain of silver birch and mossy oak logs. Kneeling into the frosted grass, Caratina placed the willow basket right outside the narrow, dark crevice that led to the hedgehog's den. Through the opening she could just see a tiny hint of the plum-purple wool scarf woven tightly into the dark timber. "Sleep well, little mother," Caratina whispered into the cold night. They backed away into the shadows with slow, careful steps. As they watched from the edge of the path, a small, round nose with a snuffling muzzle poked out from the dark crevice. The hedgehog sniffed the crisp winter air, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. Finding the basket of flannel and soft straw, she let out a long, contented puff of air, and immediately began dragging a piece of the warm red fabric deep into her home. She was safe. She was warm. And she was entirely unhurried. Back inside the absolute security of Rosehip Cottage, the heavy timber door was latched tight against the rising north wind. The kitchen was a sanctuary of deep, radiating warmth, the black cast-iron stove humming with a predictable, comforting heat. Rosco prepared a large earthenware pot of sweet chamomile tea, adding a generous spoonful of dark clover honey that dissolved into the steaming amber liquid with a gentle swirling motion. They sat together in their high-backed armchairs, cradling the warm mugs in their paws, listening to the soft, rhythmic whistle of the wind in the chimney. The bunnies felt a profound, heavy peace settling over their limbs. The magical hat had taught them that when you take the time to see the world through another's eyes, anger simply has no room left to live. The missing scarf was gone, but in its place, a deep sense of community and quiet kindness had taken root in their hearts. One by one, they pulled their thick, heather-purple wool blankets right up to their chinnigans. The fire died down to a lazy crimson glow, casting long, peaceful shadows across the farmhouse kitchen. The mugs were empty. Their hands were still, and their minds were completely at rest. As you let your own eyes close fully now, and you sink deeper into the absolute comfort of your own bed, let these gentle thoughts wrap around you. My day is beautifully complete, and I can rest now. I am surrounded by warmth, safety, and absolute peace. I give myself full permission to let go of the world. I am perfectly protected, and all is taken care of. I am ready to drift into a deep, unbroken sleep. Let the slow, lazy pulse of the night carry you deeper and deeper into the quiet dark. The basket is delivered. The hedgehogs are warm. Rosehip Cottage is fast asleep, and you are entirely safe. All was snug. All was well. Night night.